My guest is Octavio Herrera. He is the co-founder and executive vice president of Lucid Sight, a frontier gaming company that is exploring the latest in game technologies. Octavio has been a serial entrepreneur for almost 2 decades. He started his first company, Media Defender, in 2000, which became the largest anti-piracy company in the world, a company that defended artists and musicians against the likes of Napster and other file sharing companies. That company sold just 5 years later for $42.5 million. After that, Octavio co-founded Gerbo, a mobile game company that was a pioneer for free games on the iPhone. They actually created like 15 of the first 100 free games available on the iPhone. Then Gerbo pivoted their focus, changed their name to AdColony, and soon became a leading mobile video advertising platform trusted by top mobile app developers and Fortune 500 brands. AdColony was then purchased by Opera Software for $350 million in 2014. Octavio is an active angel investor. He is a husband, a father of 2. He has an amazing story, and today we're going to hear a little bit about that story, both of entrepreneurial success and what happened leading up to that, as well as how he's continued to follow his heart, his passion, and stay true to who he is. We're also going to look at how he views leadership, building teams, and bringing out the best in the people around him. He continues to build amazing teams, and now he leads in a way that brings out the best in those around him. I'm so grateful to have him here today. Octavio, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So we always like to start just by jumping in with how you define success.
Yeah, well, I define success pretty straightforward. Set goal, move toward goal. And success to me is overcoming all of those things that get in your way, as you are trying to reach your goal. Overcoming those, that's success, whatever goal it may be.
Now, did you always have that as a kid, or was that something you learned? Do you remember where that came from?
I don't know. I don't know that I can think back as a kid feeling that way. I think more once I graduated from college, or I guess even going through college, trying to get through classes, get the best grade I possibly could. I was a physics major, and I didn't love physics or even science that much. I just kind of ended up a physics major. But my goal was to graduate with a degree with the best grades I could, and I did what I could to get there, and had a lot of obstacles along the way, and I think it set my path. And then in my 20s, I had certain goals that I wanted to achieve for my career, and that's what I did.
But your goals have been pretty big. I want to go back to kind of where you came from as well, because I think the origin story is so important for us to know. Can you tell a little bit about just your background and where you grew up in your family? And
sure. Yeah. Well, I'm actually a twin, and my brother and I are sons of immigrant parents. My mom grew up in a very, very tiny town in Jalisco, in Mexico, called Ayutla. I'm talking cobblestone roads. She didn't have electricity until she was, well into her teenage years. My dad was actually born in the United States, of Mexican-American heritage, but my grandmother, who was 13 when she had him, when he was an infant, took him to Mexico and raised him in Mexico. In Mexico City, he had a pretty harsh upbringing, and was a pretty tough guy, and eventually ended up making his way back to the U.S., meeting my mom here, and they got married and had us. And so I had a strange combination of, my mom was as traditional Mexican values that you could think of, but my dad was a little more worldly. He had lived a lot, and he was a city guy, and he was in the United States very young, and he was in the army, and he loved this country and spoke pretty good English. So that was my background. My dad always really focused on education and reading. We stopped speaking Spanish at our house when we were 5 years old, because my dad really wanted us to perfect the language. So I grew up in Los Angeles, in an area called Linwood, which is southeast Los Angeles. And in middle school, we moved to Southgate, which was a neighboring city. Just sort of urban Los Angeles upbringing in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah. So I want to just, as we go into kind of the college years and beyond, but I do want to start just again with those values. You say very traditional from your mom, very
Yes.
traditional Mexican values.
Yes.
What were those?
Right.
And then what would you kind of classify as the 2 or 3 key values from your dad that
Yeah.
made up kind of your...
Yeah, I think my mom, you know, the traditional, you know, listen to your parents, you know, go to church. You know, my mom's very Catholic. We were in Catholic school growing up. You know, I think in her view, you know, raising children, raising sons was to raise boys that, you know, went to church, said their prayers, were good to their mother, and you know, probably in her mind, I was going to live at home until I got married, and then eventually move out with my wife, you know, who'd probably be a Mexican woman, you know, and so that's what I mean. I mean, that was her whole life, and so she didn't know anything different. My dad, in contrast, I think was just more worldly and more open to different views. He read a lot. You know, we had, you know, encyclopedias in the house, and my dad would, you know, tell us stories of you know, his adventures in life. You know, I think that sort of allowed me to think a little more like, well, it doesn't have to be this cookie cutter way of doing it. For example, my dad was 50 when he had us. You know, I had a half brother. He had a previous relationship. He had just lived more life, and I think he was also, even though he had a 6th grade education, I think he was better educated. He read a lot. And so I think that sort of gave me the confidence to, you know, try new things and not go by that mold. Yeah.
That's awesome. So then you hit high school, and then you go to a private liberal arts school.
Yes.
How did you choose there? What was the...
Yeah, well, my older cousin actually went to Occidental College. She was the first one of, I have 24 cousins, I believe, and she was the first, her and another cousin, I guess, we're both the same age. We're the first ones to go to actual college, right, in the entire family. And so she went to Occidental College, so I went to visit her one time, and I really loved it. If you've ever been to Occidental, it's a liberal arts college in the traditional sense of the East Coast liberal arts schools, right? But it's in LA, it's in Eagle Rock. So it's you know, it's best of both worlds. You can sort of have this little beautifully manicured, beautiful buildings. You feel like you're in college, and then walk 3 blocks and go get, you know, tacos, right? So it's just very comfortable for me. And it was also small. I think our graduating class was, I don't even remember, probably like 400 or 500 people. I think the entire college at the time was like 1,600 students. My high school was 4,000 students. You know, my middle school was, you know, 5,000 students. So I wanted to go to a small school. So I chose Oxy. I thought I wanted to be an engineer. Occidental College has I think they still have it. They have a program called the 3-2 program, where you go 3 years to Oxy and you get a science degree. And then you go 2 years to you transfer to Caltech.
Okay.
I could not get into Caltech coming out of high school, so I thought, hey, this is a way that I could end up at Caltech. So I went into Oxy, majored in physics. Then, you know, physics was hard enough. I'm like, I'm not going to succeed at Caltech. It's not going to work. Plus, you know, I met great people and I loved Oxy, so I ended up getting the physics degree at Oxy.
So physics was the like the choice for physics, which you said earlier, wasn't something that you totally...
No,
that was a means to an end at the time.
Yeah, I remember graduating high school, I thought as a career, what would I want to do? I like roller coasters. I'll be an engineer, mechanical engineer, and I'll make roller coasters one day. I mean, that's literally as much thought as I put into it. And I was like, oh, this school, I could end up at Caltech getting an engineering degree. That's where I'm going. I felt comfortable because I'd been to the campus, and they gave me a great financial aid package, to their credit. Because, you know, my dad was a baker, my mom was a homemaker. Like, we didn't have money. So the only way I could have gone was a great financial aid package, which Oxy did give me.
Awesome.
And I've always been appreciative of that.
That's awesome. So you get this physics, then what happens? Because this part is where you do something and then you transition to be an entrepreneur. So tell us a little bit about this space.
Well, so, you know, going into senior year, what am I going to do with my life? I don't want to continue to study physics. I just need a job. I applied. This was 1998. I heard, you know, this whole internet thing was pretty cool. So I tried to, you know, I had taken 2 programming classes. And I thought, oh, maybe I could get a job as a software developer. Was very underqualified to get that job anywhere, but I did end up getting a job at Raytheon, which is a defense contractor in El Segundo, in their radar division, doing software development. So I took the job, and I did that for a year or so. Pretty much, I think the second or third week there, I met Randy Saf, who is my business partner to this day.
Yeah.
So literally walking down the hall, we met each other, we just became friends, and he said to me, hey, I have this professor in college who told us, he went to Harvey Mudd, which is a really good engineering school. He told us that with the internet and all of this, that the best thing we could do for our careers is start, a company. Do you want to start a company with me? And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. And I hated the job at Raytheon. It was a big company. I just didn't feel like I was going to add any value there. I also didn't think I'd be a good software engineer at Raytheon. I didn't think my skill set was good for that. So that's how it sort of began. But that took a while. Randy and I were young. We were 21, 22. I think we were 21 when we met, and started dreaming about starting a company. We had no resources, no ability to do it. So I was working at Raytheon, hoping to maybe do that one day. And I got really, really sort of depressed working at Raytheon and thinking, my career wasn't really going anywhere. So in the same year, after a year working at Raytheon, I decided to apply to business school, apply to law school, and apply to the FBI. Because I actually always wanted to be an FBI agent, just as a kid.
You do actually look like you'd be an amazing
Thank
FBI
you, thank
agent.
you. I thought I'd be a good one too. So I did all of those three things at the same time. Simply, my goal, being goal-oriented, my goal was to not be a Raytheon engineer.
To get out.
Yeah, that's it. That's my goal.
Yeah.
To not be here.
Anything else.
Anything else, but I need to pay bills.
Yeah.
I was just about to get married with my wife, and she was a teacher getting her master's degree, so, we didn't have a lot of money. Anyways, I did that. I applied to business school, law school, FBI, and in the process of that, Randy and I kept meeting once a week to talk about different business ideas, and eventually, he called me one day with the idea that became Media Defender, the company that we started, and so I didn't do those other things, and I pursued starting this company and finding investors and doing all that.
So I want to hear a little bit about that, but let's go back because this is so fascinating. You and Randy meet weekly for brainstorming. What was this? What were those meetings?
Yeah, it's funny. So I was working at Raytheon. He actually left Raytheon before I did, and he actually did go to law school. Okay. He applied to UCLA, got in, and he was going to UCLA Law School. Again, he didn't want to be a lawyer. He just didn't want to be a Raytheon engineer. And I was still working at Raytheon, so every Thursday evening we would get together and we either go get beers or go get some food. Eventually Survivor premiered. We started watching Survivor weekly. So literally I'd go to his apartment, we'd watch Survivor, and then for an hour or two we would brainstorm ideas. And what if we created a website for students this was actually an idea, to collaborate so that they could help each other with their homework. And we called it Homework Store. What if we created a game where people had virtual pets? And we would just come up with these ideas, and then our entire goal was come up with an idea, come up with a business plan, and then find investors. Because Randy and I, we were both, technical enough to be able to come up with ideas that were practical, but neither one of us could really program to the level that you would need to. We knew we had to hire some great software engineers, so we needed capital for that. So our entire goal in that whole process was to come up with a fundable idea. But it was a combination of also just hanging out and, like I said, watching Survivor. And
so how long were you guys doing that?
We did that for about 9 months, maybe. Yeah.
Okay, so I think this is really an important kind of lesson. First of all, not liking something, right, can be a huge motivator to explore to explore other things. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So if you're stuck in something that's not feeling like it's your future or your passion, or where you want to be, you can feel that like, because that could have gone to depression and other
absolutely.
ways of outlets, but
Yeah.
you can also use that to fuel the creative juices, and then in this case you guys did that in a fun way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Beers, food,
Yep.
some sort of ritual around watching a show you like,
Yep.
and then brainstorming.
That's it. Yeah.
Then they stuck with it, and this is also important. Like, you can't do that one night and think like, oh, we didn't come up with anything. You do that for a while, and then over 9 months you explore different things, and then you refine, and then you get to a place where you're like, oh, this could be it.
That's it. That's
So
exactly
that's
right.
where you got.
And that's where we got. Yeah.
So that was the beginning of Media Defender. So then you needed to get investors, and this is also from two people that you haven't done this before. So just because I think a lot of us also sit in that position where we've never done that before, it feels daunting.
Yeah.
What happened? How
Well,
do you guys do that?
you know, and again, it starts with connecting with people, right? And his professor that I mentioned, that sort of motivated him, was a great resource. So we went to him. Randy had just graduated a few years ago. He still had a good relationship with this professor, Gary Evans at Harvey Mudd. I actually think he's retiring this year. He was an economics professor. We just went to him and said, here's our business plan. And he said, this is good, this is not good. And I have some investors I could maybe introduce you to, but you need to refine it, you need to think about this. And it just set us down a path. We never actually got any investors from him. That's the funny thing, right? Didn't matter. It gave us a path, it gave us the advice. I believe that his exact words were, if you guys can't hustle together $100,000, I'm not gonna introduce you to any of my investors.